Before we start, let us first briefly introduce the language Luganda. The users of this language are mostly based in Uganda. The red area on the map is the location of the country, Uganda. Here are the words relevant to this topic in phonetic form, and the words in quotes are corresponding English meaning. The vocabularies in the left column have the prefix meaning a or an, while those in the right column have the prefix meaning little. Note that the column-like symbols indicate a long vowel or consonant. For example, and this symbol means Question A asks, are nasal vowels in Luganda phonemic? That is it a distinctive feature? Also, are the nasals predictable? Question B asks, is the phonemic representation of the morpheme meaning garden demiro? Question C asks, what is the phonemic representation of the morpheme meaning canoe? Question D asks, if P and B are allophones of the same phoneme. Question E, if represents a prefix in Luganda, can you conclude that Umdano is a possible phonetic form for a word in this language starting with this prefix? Question F asks, is there a homogenic nasal rule in Luganda? Question G says, if the phonetic representation of the word meaning little boy is agapobe, give the phonemic and phonetic representations for a boy. Question H asks, which of the following is the phonemic representation for the prefix meaning a or am? Question I asks, what is the phonetic representation of the word meaning a branch? Question J asks, what is the phonemic representation of the word meaning little stranger? Finally, question K asks you to state the 3 phonological rules revealed by the Luganda data. First, we find all the nasal vowels. Here the nasal vowels are marked in red, while the consonants immediately following are marked in blue. We can observe the first rule, called vowel nasalization. A vowel is nasalized when it precedes a nasal consonant. In feature notations, it looks like this. Therefore, we see that nasal vowels are not phonemic, that is, not a distinctive feature in Luganda, and so they are predictable. Next, we compile the words and find the root of each word. Let's look at the first row. We mark the different parts of these 2 words in red. We observe that the parts in red occur at the beginning of the words, one meaning a or an, and the other meaning little. The parts in black are their common root. However, the 4 words on the left column that are inside the green bracket do not have the prefix an. Instead, they have either an or ang. Because these 2 prefixes do not appear as frequently, for now we will view them as variations of an and mark them in blue and purple. In addition, the 3rd letter is also marked in the corresponding color in order to check the environment. Since there are no variations in the prefix for the words on the right column, we will ignore them for now and focus on the words in the left column. After observation, we can find a second rule, called homogenic nasal rule. Assimilates to the place of articulation of the following consonants. For example, if precedes velar sound like g, k, or then it assimilates to the homorganic On the other hand, if precedes labial sounds like b, p, or m, it assimilates to the homorganic m. Now that the prefixes have been solved, let us take a look at the root. If we remove all the prefixes in black, we find that the roots are all the same except for the 3 pairs within the blue bracket, the roots of which begin differently. In the left column, they begin with m, ng, n, whereas in the right, they begin with b, g, d. So now we have to decide which are the original roots. In other words, we have to determine if m, ng, n becomes b, g, d, or if b, g, d becomes m, ng, n. In step 3, we find a rule that explains the 3 exceptions. After oscillation, we see a third rule called voiced stop assimilation. When a voiced stop consonant is preceded by a nasal consonant, this voiced stop consonant will become homorganic nasal. In feature notations, the rule looks like this. To put it simply, when b, d, g are each preceded by m, n, and ng, the voiced stop consonants themselves are assimilated to m, n, and ng respectively. Returning to these 3 pairs of words, we now understand that the root originally began with b, g, d, and only became m, n, and ng after undergoing voiced stop assimilation. Next, we determine which of the following forms is the phonemic representation for a prefix meaning a or an by using the 3 rules we found. Since the prefixes in the right column means little, we will ignore them for now. We turn our sight to the first prefix colored in red, which is a nasalized vowel. By our first rule, vowel nasalization, this vowel only became nasalized because it precedes a nasal consonant. To return to its default form, we simply remove the tilde above the vowel. Looking at the second sound in the prefix, we again see the majority are all n, and they only became m or ng when homorganically nasalized by the third sound. Thus, we conclude the default form of the second sound is simply n, and so the first form, an, is the correct answer. Continuing on, question B asks, is the phonemic representation of the morpheme meaning garden demuro? The answer is yes, as previously discussed. By removing the prefix aka, which means little, the remaining part is the root. And the reason the start of the root in the first word looks different is because voiced stop assimilation owing to a preceding nasal consonant has changed the into n. Question C asks, what is the phonemic representation of the morpheme meaning canoe? There's no trick here, just take away the prefixes and we have our answer. Next, question E asks, if on represents a prefix in Luganda, can you conclude that Amdano is a possible phonetic form for a word in this language starting with this prefix? It is obvious from the question that we should look at whether such a phonetic combination of prefix and root is possible. First, we turn our attention to a prefix ending sound, m, and the starting sound of the root that follows, d. Then we find their places of articulation from the table. Recall that Rule 2, the homorganic nasal rule, tells us that the ending of the prefix assimilates to the place of articulation of a following consonant. However, here, m and d do not share the same place of articulation, so umdano is not a possible phonetic form. To get a possible phonetic form, we can change the ending of the prefix from m to n, so that it shares the same place of articulation as d. Next, question G says, if the phonetic representation of the word meaning little boy is akapobe, give the phonemic and phonetic representations for a boy. First, we remove the prefix aka to obtain the root pobe, the phonetic representation for boy. Since there has been no mention of any phonetic variation of pobe, we can assume that the phonemic representation is identical. Now that we have the phonemic representation of the root, we just have to combine it with the prefix meaning a, whose phonemic form is an, to obtain the phonemic representation for a boy. To further derive the phonetic representation, we have to apply the rules we found previously. Here we use vowel nasalization and the homorganic nasal rule to modify the prefix and obtain the final phonetic form. Question I asks, what is the phonetic representation of the word meaning a branch? We first look for the root meaning branch and find that the 18th word means little branch, which is what we want. As before, simply removing the prefix aka, we get the phonemic and phonetic form of the word branch. Next, we add the prefix meaning a, whose phonemic representation is an, to get the phonemic form of a branch. To fully derive the phonetic representation, we have to apply the rules we found previously. Here we use vowel nasalization to modify the prefix and obtain the final phonetic form. Moving on to question J. What is the phonemic representation of the word meaning little stranger? We first look for the root meaning stranger and find that the 9th word means a stranger, which is what we want. Then, simply by removing the prefix an, we get a phonemic and phonetic form of the word stranger. Next, we add the prefix meaning little, whose phonemic representation is aka, to get the phonemic form of little stranger. To fully derive the phonetic representation, we have to apply the rules we found previously. Here we use vowel nasalization to modify the root and obtain the final phonetic form. In step 5, we will check the environments of p and b, since one of the questions asks us if p and b are allophones of the same phoneme. First, we mark these two phones in different colors and then place the words containing these forms into two groups. Here are the two groups. We list all the environments of the two forms here. After observation, we find that both p and b can occur in the last environment, namely between a and e. In other words, the occurrence of p and b cannot be predicted by a rule. Therefore, we conclude p and b are not allophones of one phoneme. They represent separate phonemes. In the last step, we summarize the 3 rules we found. The first rule is called vowel nasalization. A vowel is nasalized when it precedes a nasal consonant. The second rule, the homoganic nasal rule. N assimilates to the place of articulation of the following consonant. The third rule, called voiced stop assimilation, is when a voiced stop consonant is preceded by a nasal consonant. This voiced stop consonant will become homoganic nasal. Here we illustrate the last 2 rules so that become easy to remember. When a phone N precedes velar sounds, it assimilates to a homoganic and velar N. On the other hand, when N precedes bilabial sounds, it assimilates to a homoganic and bilabial M. This is called the homoganic nasal rule. Next, if the voiced stop consonants the, d, g, circled here in purple, are each preceded by m, n, and ng, the voiced stop consonants themselves are assimilated to m, n, and ng, respectively. This rule is called voiced stop assimilation. Finally, we demonstrate another example of applying these rules. Here we pick the 7th word. The word's original phonemic representation looks like this, which I indicate with 2 slashes. To get the final phonetic representation, we need to apply the rules we found. First, we apply vowel nasalization. There are 2 vowels here that are affected by their following nasal consonant, so we add a tilde symbol to both. Next, we apply the homoganic nasal rule. The ending of the prefix assimilates to the place of articulation of the following consonant and become Lastly, we apply voiced stop assimilation, so the start of the root, in return, becomes assimilated by the ending of the prefix, becoming as well. And so, this is the final phonetic representation. Remember, 2 identical consonants can be simplified by a long consonant symbol, so we can also write it like this. We see this is exactly the same as what the textbook gave us, proving that our method is correct. The following are answers from the publisher, which can be used as a reference.